Welcome to Global Watch. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. The global economy stands on a precipice, its future uncertain and its stability threatened as never before in recent memory. It teeters on the edge of a chasm carved by years of geopolitical ambition, economic rivalry, and the relentless escalation of trade warfare. Tension grips Washington, Beijing, and capitals worldwide, seeping into markets, boardrooms, and the daily lives of ordinary people. What began as a series of trade disputes has now escalated into a confrontation threatening the livelihoods of billions, with uncertainty clouding the future of global cooperation. The latest U.S. ultimatum to China has sent shockwaves through the intricate web of global commerce, disrupting supply chains and shaking investor confidence. This is about more than tariffs. It's about power, shifting influence, and the real consequences for ordinary people, from rising prices to lost jobs and shrinking opportunities. On November 4, 2025, the world waits in anxious silence as the deadline passes, holding its collective breath for what comes next. Financial analysts brace for chaos. Diplomats scramble for solutions, racing against time to prevent a global economic unraveling. The decisions of President Trump and President Xi now hold the fate of the global economy, as the world watches their every move with apprehension. The tools of this conflict are tariffs and supply chain disruptions, not missiles, yet the stakes are just as high, with prosperity and peace hanging in the balance. As we dive into this escalating trade war, remember, behind every headline are jobs, families, and futures hanging in the balance, waiting for the world to exhale. This crisis is the result of decades of simmering tensions between the US and China. What began as economic competition has evolved into a high-stakes standoff, with both nations vying for global influence and economic dominance. Since China joined the WTO in 2001, concerns over unfair trade practices and intellectual property theft have grown in the West. American and European companies accused China of exploiting loopholes, while Chinese industries rapidly expanded. Frustration in Washington mounted as the U.S. trade deficit with China soared, and manufacturing jobs vanished. Entire communities were hollowed out, fueling political anger and calls for action. President Trump's return to office marked a new, aggressive phase. Sweeping tariffs, some as high as 46%, targeted China directly. The administration argued these measures were necessary to protect American industries and restore balance. The administration threatened a 104% tax on Chinese imports unless Beijing rolled back its own tariffs. This unprecedented move sent shockwaves through global markets and raised fears of a full-blown trade war. The strategy soon expanded, with ultimatums to South Korea and Japan to relocate manufacturing to the U.S., straining alliances. Long-standing partnerships were tested as economic pressure mounted. For export-driven economies like South Korea, the pressure was existential, forcing companies to choose between U.S. and Chinese markets. Boardrooms across Asia faced agonizing decisions about their future. The U.S. aimed to force a fundamental restructuring of trade, viewing the $440 billion deficit as a security threat. Lawmakers and analysts debated whether these drastic steps would truly protect American interests. This go-it-alone approach left allies alienated, creating a volatile global environment where any spark could ignite a larger fire. The world watched anxiously, aware that the next move could reshape the global order. On October 21, 2025, President Trump, flanked by Australia's Prime Minister, issued a direct ultimatum to Beijing: agree to a new trade deal by November 1st, or face tariffs of 155% on Chinese imports. This was not a bluff. It was economic warfare, designed to cripple China's economy and force concessions. The U.S. also announced sweeping export controls on critical software, targeting China's tech ambitions. The message: America would use every economic weapon to defend its leadership. The timing, alongside a major U.S.-Australia minerals and defense deal, signaled allied unity against China. Global markets plunged. The scale of the ultimatum stunned analysts and threatened to halt U.S.-China trade entirely. With just 10 days to respond, the world braced for either a breakthrough or a catastrophic decoupling. The countdown to November 1st began, with the world watching for any sign of a diplomatic off-ramp. Beijing's response was swift and defiant, condemning the U.S. move as economic coercion. Chinese officials accused Washington of trying to strangle China's development and vowed not to submit. The government hinted at sweeping export controls on rare earths, pharmaceuticals, and industrial components, products where China dominates global supply. The threat: China could weaponize its manufacturing power, creating shortages worldwide. President Xi projected calm, touring tech firms, and emphasizing self-reliance. State media framed the trade war as a catalyst for China's technological independence. Despite the fiery rhetoric, a thread of diplomacy remained. Trump and Xi planned to meet in South Korea, with a possible visit to China in 2026. China's strategy balanced defiance with patience, preparing for the worst while leaving room for negotiation. The world watched as both sides maneuvered between confrontation and the slim hope of a settlement. Amid the US-China standoff, the Netherlands emerged as an unexpected casualty. As a hub of global trade and technology, the Dutch economy was deeply exposed to any disruption. China's threat of export controls sent panic through Dutch industries, especially tech giant ASML, vital to the global semiconductor supply chain. The port of Rotterdam, Europe's largest, faced the prospect of plummeting shipping volumes and job losses. Dutch farmers and exporters feared being sideswiped by retaliatory tariffs. The Netherlands' interconnectedness, once a strength, became a vulnerability. Politically, the US ultimatum put the Dutch government in a bind: support an ally or protect national interests. The crisis fueled debate in the EU about strategic autonomy and the risks of relying on US policy. The Dutch dilemma mirrored that of many US allies: how to maintain transatlantic ties while shielding their economies from the fallout. The Netherlands became a symbol of the collateral damage inflicted by the superpower showdown. The US ultimatum and China's response sent shockwaves through the global economy. Stock markets from New York to Tokyo plunged, volatility soared, and uncertainty became the new normal. For businesses, the trade war shattered the idea of stable supply chains. A 155% tariff is an effective embargo. Companies scrambled to reconfigure production, but alternatives to China's manufacturing power were scarce. Consumers in the US faced rising prices on everyday goods, while Chinese workers feared mass layoffs. Export-driven economies like Germany, South Korea, and Japan were caught in the crossfire, their industries threatened at every stage. The strengthening US dollar pressured emerging markets, spreading the pain far beyond the main players. The trade war became a global contagion, disrupting economies everywhere. To make sense of the crisis, we turn to Dr. Evelyn Reed, senior fellow at Chatham House, whose expertise in global economics and international relations offers a unique lens on the unfolding drama. Dr. Reed explains, "We're seeing the weaponization of economic interdependence, where the very ties that once fostered cooperation are now being used as leverage in a dangerous contest. What once kept peace is now a vulnerability, as nations realize that their economic connections can be turned against them in times of conflict. Both the US and China are using tariffs and export controls as tools of statecraft, probing each other's weak points and testing the limits of their economic power. This isn't just a trade dispute, it's a battle for technological supremacy and global influence," Dr. Reed emphasizes, highlighting how control over advanced technology will shape the world order for decades to come. The US aims to slow China's tech rise, but in doing so, it risks pushing China towards self-sufficiency, accelerating innovation behind closed doors, and splitting the global tech ecosystem into rival blocks. A 155% tariff, Dr. Reed says, isn't for negotiation, it's for destruction. Such measures are designed to inflict maximum pain, not to bring the other side to the table. It signals a willingness to decouple entirely, to sever economic ties that have defined the modern era, and to accept the risks that come with such a dramatic shift. The risk: underestimating China's resilience and the global fallout, including damage to allies, supply chain disruptions, and the looming threat of a worldwide recession. The most dangerous aspect is the cycle of escalation. Each side feels compelled to respond forcefully, making de-escalation harder and raising the stakes with every move. Diplomatic off-ramps, like the planned Trump-Xi summit, are crucial, but increasingly difficult to achieve as trust erodes and positions harden on both sides. The world is trapped in a high-stakes game of chicken with global prosperity, stability and the future of international cooperation hanging in the balance. Behind the headlines, the human cost of the trade war is mounting. In the US, farmers face bankruptcy as Chinese markets close, threatening generations of family businesses. In China, factory workers like Li Wei fear layoffs as American orders dry up, risking a return to poverty for millions. Small U.S. businesses reliant on Chinese imports face impossible choices: raise prices or shut down. Construction costs soar, threatening jobs and housing projects. These are the unseen victims. Collateral damage in a fight between giants. The economic pain fuels social and political divisions in both countries, deepening resentment and uncertainty. The decisions of leaders are felt most acutely by those with the least power. As the November 1st deadline passes, the world waits in suspense. Will the US implement the 155% tariffs, or is this brinkmanship? The planned Trump-Xi summit in South Korea is now the world's best hope for de-escalation. Both leaders must find a way to claim victory at home while making real concessions. The stakes: global economic stability and the future of international relations. This crisis has exposed the fragility of supply chains and accelerated the push for strategic autonomy worldwide. We are entering an era of economic fragmentation where alliances and security shape trade. The outcome will define the world our children inherit: cooperation or division, prosperity or peril.